Hey everyone, we're Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
And we're also featuring a special guest today, God of Politics. Make sure to subscribe to his channel.
Hello.
So, what we're going to be talking about today is mail-in voting, the history, how it works, who argues what, and how will it work for the election, and why we're even doing it in the first place.
Yep, and we'll see if it helps or hurts either side. We'll leave a link to God's channel in the description. Make sure you go check his channel out. It's a great channel. And with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, so Eric will start first by kind of explaining how this kind of works.
Mm-hmm. So, this election is going to be very special. Coronavirus has definitely impacted a lot of fields, and going out to vote is a big part of it because, it's a very public thing. You have to meet in the building. You touch the same voter applications. It's a very public thing. So Democrats have been requesting that we do something more remotely, so a mail-in voting. So it would be an absentee ballot where the person writes their name down and their address and sends their vote to the Postal Service, where there's a further verification process and like a two-way authorization, and then that is processed as a vote.
Correct, and actually, some states allow for mail-in voting without an excuse. Like as you can see here, a lot of these do not require an excuse to vote, while some actually do require an excuse to vote. I actually don't see it here, but I don't think that's really a good idea. I think that at this point, for a safety concern, I do think that states should be allowing their people to vote by mail, regardless of whether or not they have an excuse to. All right.
And one of the other things we've been seeing is that due to the pandemic recently, a lot more states have been allowing no excuse absentee voting. For example, New York it did not have no excuse absentee voting. Now it does, and so a lot of states are following in suit of that as well due to this.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think we should probably explain what no excuse mail-in voting means. It essentially means that you cannot use COVID-19 as an excuse to not turn out in the polls, to not go in person and vote and use your mail-in. So you have to have a separate excuse outside of COVID-19. All right.
So another one of the interesting things that we saw, this was an Emerson poll that had Biden up 4 overall, but if you look at the ways people are voting, people that are voting in person are voting overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, whereas people that are voting by mail are voting overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. And, this is actually quite surprising. Many people speculated that, due to older people voting, who, especially during the pandemic, may not necessarily want to go to the polls, they'd vote by mail and that would help Republicans. But what polls have shown consistently is that people voting by mail are overwhelmingly Democrat. And that's actually quite an interesting thing that we've seen so far.
So I do think it's very interesting to consider this, which means that if we don't have this mail-in voting thing, Trump would win by a pretty large margin here, 65-32. But considering the large number of voting by mail, if you cut those out of the equation, that is not good for the Democrats at all.
Yep, and for the most part, Donald Trump has declared that he would just postpone the election, while Democrats do want to vote by mail. And this leads to the huge controversy that is happening this week, with the United States Postal Service. And, the Democrats and Republicans having differing opinions on how to fund and what exactly to focus on. The postmaster is it is speculated that the postmaster is just a Trump ally, and Democrats are really not happy with his remarks on the United States Postal Service as well.
Right, I completely agree with what you're saying, and he, I don't think he really doesn't want this to happen. He really doesn't want mail-in voting to happen, but he technically cannot postpone the election without the support of Congress, which it doesn't look like he's getting right now. Mm-hmm. So we also, actually, before we go to this, let's actually discuss, God actually brought this up with the voting by mail deadlines. Is it this one?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things that we've actually seen is if you look at the deadlines for people that are voting by mail when you have to return your ballot, many states have been extending their deadlines. If you look at a state like California, for example, you can return your ballot, 3 days after the election, meaning that there's a lot more leeway from, sending in your ballot. Whereas if you look at some other states like Arizona there, for example, the ballot has to be received by the election office by 7 p.m. on election day. And, with all these revelations with the mail being slowed down, things like that, that's brought up a lot of controversy because, as we just pointed out, people voting by mail are overwhelmingly Democrat. And if some of the mail is not going to arrive on time, that is going to hurt Democratic voters.
Yeah, definitely not good. Because as Eric mentioned before, what's happening right now with the post office right now and that stuff going on, this really might not look good for Democrats because, as God stated, the high number of Democrats voting by mail. I'm kind of interested. Let's check the swing states here. Let's start with Ohio. Postmarked no later than the election, received no later than 10 days after Election Day. I think this one's actually pretty lenient, though, I think.
Ohio, for example, is a state that's had mail-in ballots for a while. They've, in 2012, for example, there was, a lot of controversy surrounding the mail-in ballots. And, they've set up a very good system in terms of mail-in ballots. And if you look at, many other states that do their entire election by mail, they also have similar deadlines. So Ohio is one of those examples.
And I think it's interesting because if you look at other states like Pennsylvania, this one's a lot more stringent, saying that you have to be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. That's a much different from this one, which is received no later than 10 days after Election Day. I think that's pretty interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is quite interesting. And many states have been, trying to extend the deadlines. Most recently, Pennsylvania, as you just pointed out, currently their deadline is around 8 p.m. on election night, but they've been trying to extend it. The Democratic governor's been trying to extend the date so more mail-in ballots could be counted after the election.
Right. All right. Eric, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, but it's kind of specific to exactly more of like the logistics. So once again, Donald Trump wants to kind of not fund the Postal Service, which would slow down kind of processing the ballots, and not enough money to pay the staff, and it would cause a lot of problems if you do not fund the Postal Service. And Democrats are really advocating for the opposite.
Right. So I do think that looking at right now, what's happening right now will definitely probably hurt Joe Biden in the election, considering how high of a number of people vote by mail. All right, and the final thing we want to talk about are these arguments against vote by mail. He has made claims that vote by mail is fraudulent, it doesn't work, and he's, as Eric mentioned before, recommended postponing the election because of this. What do you guys think about this?
I mean,
Yeah, no, you can go first, God.
I would just like to say, as we've pointed out, those mail-in ballots are overwhelmingly going to help Democrats, which, is part of the reason why Donald Trump has, been on such a tirade against it. But, the facts are that voter fraud is extremely rare, and when done properly, it is a very efficient system. So, yeah.
In fact, I was reading an interesting statistic, and it said that there is a 0.001% chance of some sort of mishap or interference when mail-in balloting or sabotage, etc.
Interesting. I don't believe that mail-in ballots are not perfect, but it's absolutely a very, very low fraudulent rate. So let me ask you guys this. So it's undoubtable that vote by mail, what's going on right now will probably hurt Democrats if you're defunding the Postal Service and you're not getting the votes of some Democrats. How much do you think this could hurt the Democrats if we see what's happening right now continues to happen?
I guess I could answer that. I mean, one of the things we've seen is that Democrats have been at least trying to be very swift in taking action against this. For example, Nancy Pelosi just brought the House back in session to try and vote to, give the Postal Service more funding and voting against the actions taken most recently by the Postmaster General. So they seem to be very worried about it, and I have no doubts that, if President Trump and the Postmaster General continued to do what they're doing, it would hurt Democrats overall. But Democrats seem to be very focused on it, and Trump has been somewhat open to the idea of getting more funding for the Postal Service. He's realized that there's been a lot of backlash to it, so I think that's something that we should also watch out for in the future.
Absolutely. And I think that is it for this episode. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please subscribe, and also subscribe to God's channel. He's a great channel going right now. And We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.